Hey there, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are going to completely flip the script on how we think about money. Usually when we talk about getting wealthy, our minds immediately go straight to spreadsheets, complex formulas, and high level math. But as we're going to discover today, earning, and more importantly, keeping money actually has very little to do with how smart we are and literally everything to do with how we behave. So let's dive into the true psychology behind wealth. It's a fascinating journey, and it totally proves that getting rich is way more about your mindset than your math skills. All right, to set the stage, let's look at a genuine mystery. It's a real life scenario that completely defies conventional logic. How on earth did a guy who spent his entire life sweeping floors and fixing cars at a gas station end up vastly outsmarting a highly educated, top tier corporate executive? I know it sounds like the setup to a joke, right? But it's a perfectly true story, and it strikes right at the heart of our explainer today. Okay, so picture this. On one hand, we have Ronald Reed. He was a janitor and a gas station attendant living a completely normal, unassuming life. On the exact opposite end of the spectrum, we have Richard Fusconi. This guy was a Harvard-educated genius and the vice chairman of a massive multinational company. I mean, he even owned a mansion with 11 bathrooms. Now, pure logic dictates that Richard should be the wealthy one and Ronald should be struggling. But when Ronald passed away in 2014, he left behind a staggering fortune of $8 million. And Richard Fusconi? Well, he lost absolutely everything in the 2008 financial crash and went totally bankrupt. This brilliantly illustrates our core premise. Traditional indicators of success, like a fancy degree or a high-paying job, absolutely do not guarantee long-term wealth. So what actually does? Section 1. Luck, risk, and the lens of experience. Let's see how our personal history shapes our financial choices. To really understand Ronald Reed's secret, we have to recognize that nobody is actually crazy when it comes to money. We just make decisions based on our own deeply personal experiences. For example, if you were born in 1950, you grew up watching a completely dead stock market. But if you were born in 1970, you witnessed massive, explosive market booms. Your personal history completely dictates your financial worldview. And intertwined with that experience are the totally uncontrollable forces of luck and risk. We all know Bill Gates, right? He became one of the richest men in the world largely because he was incredibly lucky to have access to a computer in 1968, a time when almost no one else did. But then there's Kent Evans. Kent was Bill Gates' high school friend, and by all accounts, he was actually smarter and more brilliant than Gates. But Kent tragically died in a mountain climbing accident before he could achieve his potential. If Kent hadn't encountered that fatal risk, we might be talking about him today instead of Bill Gates. The takeaway here is absolutely crucial. Both luck and risk play massive roles in wealth creation. So we really can't judge our own financial journeys just by comparing ourselves to extreme outliers who might have just caught the right breeze. So moving right along to section 2, the magic of compounding. If we can't just rely on extreme luck, what's the reliable solution for everyday folks like us? Well, look at Warren Buffett, widely considered the greatest investor of all time. You might think his superpower is just picking the perfect stocks, but it's actually time. Here's a stat that will blow your mind. An unbelievable 95% of his total wealth was accumulated after his 65th birthday. Yeah, only 5% was made before he turned 65. Buffett understands that investing isn't about making a quick buck. It's about leaving your money alone and letting the compounding effect do all the heavy lifting over decades. And this brings us right back to our gas station janitor, Ronald Reed. 42. That is the number of years Ronald Reed simply left his money alone in the market. He steadily invested, and he never, ever interrupted the compounding process. Contrast that with what most people do today. You know the drill. Many beginners start a systematic investment plan, an SIP, and the very minute the market gets a little bumpy in that first year, they freak out and pull their money out. Ronald Reed's absolute genius was simply his extreme patience. Section 3. Getting wealthy versus staying wealthy, this is a massive distinction. You see, getting wealthy requires taking risks, being super optimistic, and putting yourself out there. But staying wealthy, that requires the exact opposite. Consider the incredibly dark but essential story of Jesse Livermore, who was once known as the world's greatest trader. During the catastrophic market crash of 1929, while everyone else was literally losing their shirts, Livermore made an unbelievable $100 million. He totally mastered the art of getting wealthy. But jump ahead just 4 short years to 1933. He had lost absolutely everything to bankruptcy, and tragically later that same year, he took his own life in a New York hotel room. Unparalleled success in making money means absolutely zero if you lack the frugality and, frankly, the healthy dose of fear required to keep it. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what if I make mistakes? Well, the good news is you don't actually have to be perfect. You just need to understand tail events. The crazy thing here is that you can actually be wrong half the time and still win big. The source material brings up an art collector named Hans who bought 99% complete junk, but he found one Picasso that made him an absolute fortune. Even Warren Buffett made 99% of his wealth from just about 10 standout stocks out of the 4 to 500 he actually invested in. In life, and for sure in investing, huge, rare successes, these tail events, will eventually make up for all those small failures. All right, section 4, the danger of ego. Let's look at the destructive nature of visible wealth. Have you ever heard of the man in the car paradox? Think about the last time you saw someone driving a sleek, roaring Ferrari down the street. Did you look at the driver and think, wow, I really admire that person? No way. You looked at the car and thought, man, I wish I was driving that car. The paradox is that people buy flashy things to earn respect and admiration from others. But observers simply bypass the owner entirely and just imagine themselves with the wealth. Showing off visible wealth rarely brings the respect people actually think it does. In letting your ego drive your finances, that can lead to some truly devastating consequences. Take Rajat Gupta, for instance. He was the highly successful CEO of McKinsey. He was a multimillionaire with a net worth of $100 million. I mean, that is a jaw-dropping amount of money. Most of us would be thrilled. But Gupta? He wasn't. He looked at his business partner, Bill Gates, and his ego just took over. He didn't just want to be a millionaire, he needed to be a billionaire. He was completely blinded by the greed for more. So what did he do to get that more? Well, he crossed a major line into insider trading, illegally using leaked, non-public company information to make trades. And because he couldn't keep his ego in check, this incredibly successful executive threw away his massive wealth, completely ruined his reputation, and actually ended up in prison. Risking what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need is just a fool's game. Which brings us to arguably the most important mathematical formula of this entire explainer. Savings equals income minus ego. It is literally that simple. The reason our gas station janitor, Ronald Reed, amassed an $8 million fortune wasn't because he had some massive income. It was because his ego was zero. He didn't feel the need to buy the Ferrari or the 11-bathroom mansion. True wealth is often invisible. It is the money you haven't spent. Section 5, the true price of success. Reaching that level of invisible wealth requires paying a toll. And that toll usually comes in the form of market volatility. It's that horrible fear that grips your stomach when your investments suddenly drop in value. When the market crashes, most beginners completely panic because they view that loss of value as a fine, a penalty for doing something wrong. But we need to reframe this immediately. Market volatility is not a fine, it is a fee. It is simply the cost of admission you have to pay for long-term growth. Because life is totally unpredictable, you always need to leave room for error, a margin of safety. You have to be prepared to weather the storms and pay the fee of volatility without abandoning your whole strategy. Which leaves us with this final, absolutely crucial question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Are you playing your own long-term game, or are you risking it all to copy someone else's? It is just so easy to see a flashy day trader online claiming to make millions and feel that urge to copy them. But think back to the lessons we've covered today. True wealth isn't about being a math genius or showing off a Ferrari. It's built quietly through extreme patience, emotional control, keeping your ego in check, and just letting compounding do the work. So ask yourself right now, is your financial strategy being driven by quiet wisdom or by the loud, visible noise of others? The answer to that might just determine your true wealth.